Well, you're still with the AM show, and we told you early on about our latest Hotline documentary, and it's focusing on how rusty Ghana's rails are and how they have become, and looking forward, what we can do as a country in order to make sure that we keep them back on track as it is. And moving forward, we also do know that we experience a lot of difficulties with our health, so we're also looking at stroke, because today is World Stroke Day. And we do have a great conversation on the subject. Komla Adum decided to have some great insight and speak to some of the best medical practitioners we have in our country who are dealing with some of these emergencies. And we're looking at what will be some of the causative factors of stroke. But look, how can you also recover, if not prevent? And we're speaking to physiotherapists and a psychologist, and we'll have a doctor being streamed into the studio via Skype. We'll have some great conversations on the subject. Look, something that we can treat. All right. And talking about some of the relevant issues also that we can talk about, we'll have a conversation with the Ghana Revenue Authority on why it's closing down shops that are not tax compliant, and also what we need to do to rope in the tax net those who haven't been covered. That is, what do we say, expanding the tax net as it is. So we'll have that great conversation. But look, we experienced the rain. And just for some few hours intermittently across various areas in Accra and its environs, and then we're in trouble. And you can find this just after the Accra end of the Accra-Tema motorway, experiencing all these difficulties, motorists having to wait for long hours when the flood waters were collected in a certain section of the Accra-Tema motorway. And that continued way into the night, and many people, residents, including myself, were stranded. Our houses gotten flooded. And subsequently, we always were clutching at straws, as we always do, recounting what we could have done or need to be doing. But it's not only in Accra that we're having all these related issues. And in the Ashanti Regional Capital of Kumasi, we also have those difficulties as well. Mahmoud Nuruddin, Ashanti Regional Correspondent, always on the beat in Kumasi as well, is joining us on the line. And Mohammed, good morning to you.
Good morning, Roland.
And what were your experiences that you could report about as you also interacted with many residents of the Ashanti Regional Capital?
Well, yesterday was the second time in my life in Kumasi here that I experienced some kind of difficulties. I was actually from Ahonaga Junction, and when the rain started, so I was heading towards Ababu. So when I got to Ababu, I had an information that most of the major street, along the airport roundabout, Dichemso, Palile, Mosizongo were flooded. So I couldn't, go home because that is where I live. I live around Mosizongo thereabout. So I had to use that stretch to my house. So I couldn't go home. I had to hang around Abu Abu for some time before I was around. I think it was around 10 o'clock before I left Abu Abu, because every major places in the city were flooded. It was very terrible.
But it speaks volumes about perhaps the state of planning. But it also means that many or even major drains got filled or overfilled with water, right?
Exactly. These places always get flooded when it rains. Anytime we experience heavy downpour in the capital, these major places, these are the major places that you're gonna experience floods. And it was not surprising. But the point is, when I was just checking around, you realize that a lot of sedimentation and barrage. You go around, you see a lot of sedimentation, which many people are attributing to the cause of the flood in the city. Houses are being built on waterlogged areas. And it is causing this kind of flood. You go to Dichemsu, for instance, the drainage system there is very poor. It's not the best that we should expect. And so it's quite difficult. Yesterday, resident passengers, motorists had to hang around for up to 7 in the evening. Some had to, even hang on long track, vehicles to be able to cross the flood, which I think was very dangerous.
But what were rescue authorities doing at the time?
At the time, we didn't see any of them around. There was no anyone. I personally didn't see anyone there. I don't know whether they were around, but I didn't see anyone there. It was even quite difficult to be searching for them, because if they were, we would have seen them. Residents were hanging. Women, old women. They were hanging just at one side of the flood, waiting for it to reduce before they'll be able to go home. So, Airport Roundabout is a major, street which connects to Abrim and Abrim, Bukrum, and even Ababu. Sometimes people use that route to Ababu, and so you could see a lot of people standing, waiting for the flood to reduce before they will be able to go. But we understand that one person, I can't confirm now, but when I came back later in the evening, I had an information that a child was killed by the flood yesterday at Mosizongo. I'm yet to do some few checks to find out whether that news is actually true, but that is the information we've gathered. Areas that we didn't expect within the Tafo municipality were flooded.
Yeah,
we didn't expect there would be some flood were flooded yesterday. I had a lot of calls last night. With regards to that.
Understandable, but the waters have since receded, like usually they would, just after 30 or an hour. So we usually don't get to see the states of the floods, especially when people have to come out after the rains, right?
Exactly. That is the case here in the capital.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Mahmoud Mohammed Nuruddin, our correspondent in the Ashanti Regional Capital, bringing us up to speed with what transpired when it rained yesterday, or the latter part of Monday. But here in Accra, there were experiences of dotted rain showers, some heavy intermittently between minutes of 20 or 30 across Tema and Accra, not at the same time, and usually characterizes a state of the weather over the last couple of months this year. And engineer Wise Amatepe is a hydrologist, also is very much acquainted, if not familiar, with the state of the city, the hydrology of the city, the planning of the city as well. He's joining us on the line. Good morning to you, engineer Amatepe. But in the meantime, this is symptomatic of what you had always predicted would happen if we have some consistent rains as a result of the poor planning in our city. Is that not it?
Yeah. Good morning. Yeah. I think you've given the right answer. Some areas are poorly planned, and so this is what will happen.
Now, take us through what the narration is. Why is it that we have been experiencing all these, and it looks like each year it gets worse?
Well, the city of Accra is expanding, and so the more the areas are cleared, that is weeded, and buildings spring out with trees, roads, and so on, then it means the delay that the flood would have experienced is now faster. There's no more delay, and so you see the high concentration of rainfall runoff, and then the services or the structures which are supposed to carry this flood If they are not adequate, then you see backwater creation, you see spillage over, and so on. This is what we are seeing.
What do you talk? You say structures and services. You mean natural structures? Is that what you're talking about?
What I mean, the structures are the culverts, the bridges, the drains. Those are the structures on the waterways which have been constructed. Yeah. You see, when the area itself is not habited, sometimes you do not see much flood because the trees, the grasses, and so on will end up delaying the flow. But once human beings occupy the place as a result of urbanization, then we have high concentration of rainfall runoff. We do not even have the potential to infiltrate. And so they all rush, the runoff rush to the point where it can be conveyed off. And if you don't keep those structures maintained, if people begin to throw in debris into those structures, if people clear the bushes and throw in the debris into the drain, you will see that they are flooded. For example, the motorway that you talk, there is people are doing a lot of cultivation along the place. When they clear, they throw the debris into the structures that are on the motorway, and they get blocked. And if the authorities do not get access to it, to know that they are blocked, it causes a lot of problems.
Right. You know, back in the 90s, when you have once in a while water, that is, we have rains that are usually more than you would have the normal volumes. You will see that the plains, there were plains now. There were plains before. You will see the waters there like the way you see in the Keta plains or the lagoon areas. Okay. Yeah. Now we have Trazaco, we have a number of these splash estates now. We also do have factories emerging on the buffer of the motorway. Logically, that explains that phenomenon, and those are the physical structures that are inhibiting the flow of water or the lack of collection of rainwater. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. So I've just explained it. Once people begin to occupy the places where water would have occupied, then definitely we'll be having flows spilling into the whole community, and where the water should have stayed, there's a building there or there's an infrastructure there, so the water rather gets to another point.
Yeah.
And so those areas which fall within the low-lying areas will definitely be flooded. If you see the motorway now, there are a lot of activities, lots of developments there, and it means areas where water would have stayed, they are no longer staying.
Okay.
They are now trying to force out and get off as fast as possible. And so we are bound to have these problems.
You are the engineer. There's nothing under the sun that we can't find remedy to. So there's always an opportunity cost for something. So if we want to do this, it means that the engineering has to be right. What should have been the ideal situation? Well, we know that we wanted to do development on plains that ideally, naturally would have collected water.
Yeah, if we are developing an area which would have collected water, then it means the facility, the drainage or water courses in those areas will have to be looked at, engineered. Now, if you see the motorway, for example, there are quite some number of waterways. None of these have been engineered yet. They are all still in their primary state. But then the community, the watersheds have been virtually been occupied. So areas where water will be staying, in those days where you see the water spreading along at the banks of the motorway without even crossing the motorway, now those areas are no more. So all the water now will be pushed. So it means the watersheds in the areas along the motorway will now have to be, attention will now have to be drawn towards that.
Okay, just be on the line for me, engineer. Wise Ametepe. We've also been joined by another intellectual, somebody who has had great intellectual capacity and teaching, as well as sharing with us policy direction in geology, geosensing, etc. Professor Emmanuel Amamuochri, who is joining us. Good morning to you, Prof. But we also do know that many of the engineers, like Engineer Wise Ametepe, will be telling us that when the water is coming up from upstream, so we're having a breeze, many of the areas along the Kwewu Ranges, the Ekape Mountains, etc. There's a certain natural order to it for it to flow through the natural water courses and ultimately into the sea. That's supposed to be the geology around it, right?
Yes. You're asking me?
Yes, Professor Amamuochri, I'm
good.
asking you.
Good. Okay. If you take any Google picture of Accra, Accra is now completely grayed. Gray is where you have sealed the surface with concrete or asphalt and disturbed the natural process.
So we'll get to Google. Please continue. We'll get the Google map and we'll see.
Yeah. Now that we are suffering, whatever we should have done, we didn't do. Maybe NADMO and the Civil Engineers Association and all that would have to, in making Accra livable, do some sort of drainage mapping where the old drainage natural ones were passing. We redraw. If it is redrawn, then we're going to find places where it will have to be reopened so that we have places where we call green and blue. See, today, because of climate change, we have what is called blue-green development or nature-based solutions. Nature-based solutions. Now, where we have these drainage problems, it means there are some places, as the engineer said, which were formerly swamp. We filled and we built. We got to redraw. There are certain places where, if it is not too expensive, the government will have to take it back, pay people, pay them, and then create a natural surface where, when there is any, a pile up, it can go either through a pipe or a covered drainage into the natural surface. You see, when you take a Nkrumah Circle, which we now call Dubai, it's been built, the natural soft surfaces that were there previously across Adabraka, it's all been sealed. So, and this is going on without any concern. It means Accra is going to become increasingly flood prone, and it's going to affect a lot of people. So it should be redrawn, and then we will have to look at reopening certain places. You see, the Temamoto Way, for instance, if you look at it casually, you may think the empty lands across are empty, but they were to be the nature-based solution artery, so that any piling on the compacted surface flows easily into left and right. You see, the division, that is the dual carry, the division, the in-between is a very wide area. It was not just wasteful use of land. It was to allow any pile up on the asphalt or concrete surface to easily flow into it, so that, and a highway is highway. If you are going at a certain speed, it should not have been a lot of trouble. But now, the way we have now allowed these misdevelopment, this abuse to go on, driving is made more risky, and then the drainage is impeded, and all sorts of discomforts are going to set in. So it is something that NADMO, for long-term purposes, will have to really, and NADMO is comprising of a whole lot of government institutions, including the Army engineers. So they should give it a good study and then identify areas with the benefit of the Google data. If not at all, they should put there certain signboard showing this is flood prone, that is flood prone. These are visual things that when the uneducated like me, I see, then it will frighten me to say, okay, this place is warned. And if somebody still insists doing anything there, then he has to be punished for the sake of society.
Mm. But Engineer Metepe, are you still on the line? Engineer Metepe?
Yeah.
What Professor Amamuatri is saying makes a lot of sense, just like what you've said as well. But now we've come to the reactive section of what should have been a proactive policy intervention. Now, I remember back in the day when I used to do great environmental reporting, I knew that we had wetlands that were declared as Ramsar sites. They were protected deliberately by state institutions to make sure that the natural order and habitats was protected. But now that we have to do the engineering, it will cost a lot of money, etc. But if you look at what Professor Amamuatri is saying, those who tend to occupy the buffer of the motorway, they're really not ordinary people. They're very rich people, very influential in our society. What you say, it doesn't get into their heads?
Yeah.
You don't advise them?
People get to occupy those areas. Some of them even come out with reports that, oh, they want to develop portions of the drainage system. But give them the permit and see. As soon as they put up their structures, they forget about the improvement that they had already promised. So I think what should be done now along the motorway, people should be tasked. I mean, those who are in the water courses should be made to pay a certain amount to, and then government beef up. Why do you go and put your structure, very expensive structure, in the waterway, and when you are flooded, you begin to call government to come and assist you? It is true that we need spaces to build, but we don't have to occupy the areas which are already reserved for the water to spread in times of flood. But as I was saying, currently the whole area, the basin within the area where the motorway is passing is occupied. So we need now have to begin a serious engineering of all the water basins within along the motorway. Otherwise, we'll be seeing a lot of flooding on the motorway. Because the structures across the bridges and the culverts, some of them were not designed to take all the flow from the upstream or the other areas. But now we are occupying those areas. It means we have to re-engineer some of the structures. I know there have been some studies recently to look at the existing culverts again on the motorway. Some recommendations have been made for the improvement of those culverts. But then it depends on the availability of funds. And so before those things are done, people who are already occupying the areas should be made to pay some money towards the development of those infrastructure, the drainage infrastructure. This is how I look at it. Because sometimes governments will be overwhelmed. Within a very short time, a whole area is expanding. And maybe the resources are not there to take to develop the drainage structures. I always say if you don't have money, you must know how to hide. That is, if you don't know how to run, you know how to hide. We don't know how to run. That is, we don't have the money. But then we allow the people to build the water courses. So we are compounding our problem.
Okay.
Really compounding the problem.
Professor Amamuatri, how do we learn from the best practices? I do know that areas in Singapore, in Dubai, that even have reclaimed lands, well-engineered, still get flooded. But at least they do it the right way, and so they only see it intermittently because they expected it as well. How can we learn from some of those best practices? Is it that we don't know, or we're just oblivious?
Oh, we know, but you see, basically, our history of physical development is that the colonial government gave to Ghana and all other Anglophone countries this indirect rule. The direct one, like the French, is assimilation. The government took the land willy-nilly. So their cartography was very sound. That was why the Malians who came at the turn of last century came to Ghana with cattle. They came, negotiated, they got the land, then they did the proper cartography, and they deposited the document at the survey department. So later, those who sold the land to them thought that they were strangers, and that if they rose up, if they came up to take it up, they would take back their land. But now they saw that it was not possible because they went through the proper cartography, registered the land, and it was entered into the topographical map of Ghana. That's why we have Medina, Kasua, and so on and so forth, large tracts of land that have gone into their hand. They knew cartography because the government of the Francophone was direct. We didn't. So 80% of the land in the hands of the chiefs, and in these days of poor governance, poverty, and so on and so forth, and the land grabbing coming in, these things are bound to rise. So we should now go back. Thank God we have oil. So some of the oil money should be used to repair certain things we have already done badly. And futuristically, we will have to do some visual mapping. Now that it is raining, now we have the benefit of image maps. We should identify the institutions that should identify and put there certain signboard. If we don't have money now, warn the public.
Okay. Professor Mamuacho, you're not blaming the colonialists, are you? The British. You're not blaming them for wars.
No.
How many years has it been since independence?
Well, since independence, yes, because we still have not gone back to now involving the chiefs in taking up the land and planning the way it should be planned. Every government, successive government, has always asked the chief release land. We should have had some funds to exercise this. There is something like conservation easement. When conservation easement is working, and I have land and it has a conservation value, I can approach the government, they say map it, let's know it is yours, and so on and so forth. Justify it with the public or the institution in charge, and with the legal department, the conservational aspect of it, and we will pay you to leave it undeveloped. These things, we have never returned to it. We've done all sorts of land administration sort of thing. We have not seen that. You should incentivize the landowners to stop selling their land critically. It is the more serious thing. If you go around from here to Cape Coast, all these riparian areas have been sold out. And people, and then these sand winners, they are digging them every day. Yeah. So it seems the authorities, we still say, oh, it's not yet time, we can close our eyes. But now,
we're in trouble.
Climate is changing.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Professor Amamuacho, thank you, geologist, geosensor as well, does great work, has contributed his quota over the years, but also helps us in trying to describe some of these issues. But Engineer Matepe, it looks like we're in trouble because the action plans are not there, right?
Yeah, we are in trouble, but then I think there should be a way out. Having realized that we are in trouble, we have to wake up and begin to address some of these problems. We can't be in trouble and remain in the trouble. He who knows that he has a problem will wake up and take up the mantle.
Okay.
So I think all is not yet lost. We still have the hope that the issues will be tackled.
Engineer Matape, where do you live?
I'm living in Pantine.
Okay, you are not affected by. I hope that you were also preventive in choosing your residence, right? Well, Engineer Matape, have a good morning, and we'll call on you subsequently on regular program on the channel if we need your help to look at some of the critical issues as and when they come. And thank you very much. But we have a couple of your messages before we move on to the next conversation. Ghana is a failed state. You say it's a hashtag you are using. So this problem didn't start just one day. It's been enumerated by a discussant this morning. The monies are supposed to fix this issue is being chopped. This one is a UK number. We also have this Roland. Good morning to you and your colleagues on the morning show. You guys are doing great work. Nana Kwekudia, who is giving us this message from Amasaman, and well, it says Kwame from Takrade. I'm surprised JoyNews couldn't report the flood at Tema live. Yeah, it was flooding. We couldn't have been dead before the period. So now we're reporting it. We also reported it within the period yesterday evening extensively as well. We also do have this message. It says, I would like to discuss the GRA issue with Professor Stephen Adair. I would appreciate if you can get me his number and set. And his number. Okay, we'll try as much as possible to respond to your call. But that'll be it for now. We told you about the discussion we're having because today is the World Stroke Day. Now, this year's theme is stroke is preventable. Don't be the one. And we're about to discuss all that next. Stay with us.